Hello Flosstube and welcome back to my channel. I'm Ros Clark. This is Ros Clark Craft here on YouTube, also over on Instagram and on Etsy. It's been a little while since we've done a normal Flosstube video. I have been doing celebration of colour videos. We are a quarter of the way through that stitch along. I've just recorded the fourth video. The fourth part is coming out well, tomorrow as I'm filming. It should be already out by the time you see this video. The fourth part is orange, and in those videos, even if you're not doing the stitch along, I'm having a lot of fun talking about colour and talking about various aspects of how we see colour, how we understand colour, how people use colour. So even if you're not doing the stitch along, you might well find that those videos are interesting and give you some things to think about. I'm slightly nervous about the one I've just done on orange, because I do end up talking about Northern Ireland politics, well, Irish politics, which is never a comfortable place to be. And hopefully I've not upset too many people too much. And if I've got stuff wrong, please feel free to correct me on that. Yeah, orange, very symbolic colour in different places. It has different kind of meanings, and that's one of the things I was talking about. Right, so in this normal Flosstube episode, I haven't got loads to talk about. I've got a fully finished object. I have got a little bit of stitching. I have got some plans I want to talk about. I've got a stitchy disaster and some thinky thoughts. I haven't had thinky thoughts for a while. Right, I'm just going to go and get my fully finished object. So, ta-da. There we go. Should we see if we can get a nice thumbnail of that for YouTube if I smile? So this is the twin bird pin cushion. You can get it from Girl with the Gavel Stitches, that's Chloe, her Etsy shop. It was a freebie for Stitch in London, and I started this on January the 1st along with Sally Flossie Sews and Goes and Sarah from Sew Me Sarah, who are doing it as their first start for their Fun for 50 stitch along. I'm not doing the Fun for 50 stitch along, even though I am going to be 50 this year, but I thought I'd start with them, and maybe depending what the last one is they do, I might do the last one, and then I can be like, look, I've been doing this, like the person who sort of appears at the marathon 100 yards before the end is like, look, I finished. I might do that. So I did want to talk to you a bit about the changes that I've made, many of which were deliberate, some of which not so much, and the finishing of it. So the first obvious change is the colours, and that was obviously a deliberate change. I did experiment with more colours, but actually on this small design, 3 seemed enough. I wanted to do the pink and the green because the border looks very geometric and is very geometric, but it's actually a flower border. So I thought, well, actually, if I stitch the sort of viney, stemmy bit in green and the flowers in pink, that makes it more obviously floral. And then we looked up at Stitch in London what on earth these birds were. So Chloe reproduced this from an old piece that she found. And we're like, what are these birds with these extraordinary bits on their heads? And they're a kind of fancy pigeon, I believe. And they come in amazing colours. And I'm like, right, well, mine are going to come in amazing colours anyway. So I added in this turquoise to the pink and the green. And I really like how that's worked out. I sort of love these bits. They sort of almost look like... you know those old-fashioned swimming caps that people used to have, old ladies used to have with like sort of 3-dimensional flowers on them? I say old ladies used to. I have one that's quite similar to that. Anyway, I could just see that as a sort of textured swimming cap. So that was the first change I made. There are also changes in the border because I found this border incredibly difficult. I made so many mistakes in it that... yeah, at one point I just gave up. I'm like, it's near enough. It's fine. It looks like it could be meant to be this. So I'm just going to leave it like that. My front border and my back border, not entirely the same. Also, my front and my back are not entirely the same. So when we got the pattern from Chloe, this had charted Stitch in London on it. I think the original one that she picked up, the vintage one, might have just been blank on the back in between the border. I'm not sure. Anyway, I thought since I was doing it with the Fun for 50 stitch along, I quite like this sort of class of 1974. I then failed entirely to centre it, having charted it, so I added in these cross stitches down the side. So it's the stitching class of 1974. I was stitching the side parts, and I knew that they had these sort of little crosses in them. I was doing this during a meeting and I didn't really want to get out the whole chart and check. So I actually stitched those, I made those up, and they are different. So on the chart, they're just charted with actual cross stitches, and mine have got sort of longer stitches like this, and then a little cross stitch over the middle, and I think they look fine. The other big change that I made deliberately was that Chloe had charted it with a border of cross stitch and then the back stitch border. So the back stitch border you do in order to stitch it together. It's like a biscornu kind of finish. And I just thought, actually, the original didn't have that line. And I think adding that line draws attention to any inconsistencies in your sewing up. And I'm lazy. So I just thought, actually, I'm not going to stitch that. I'm just going to have the line from where I do the sewing up. And I think that's worked out fine. Mine is very tiny, so I did it on 40 count. Don't use sulky on 40 count. That's my top tip from stitching this. I like how it looks, but it was quite hard work, particularly for the stitching up. Yeah, you would be well advised not to use sulky on 40 count. Don't do what I do. Do make sure, also unlike me, that you've got your counting exactly right on your back stitch border. I think because I made mistakes on the border, this, you know, the flower border, I think I then ended up with slightly different sized back stitch lines. So there are a couple of places where I've had to sort of, you can see here, yeah, tuck it in a bit to make it fit. You want your back stitch lines to be exactly the same length. Check. Count twice. So those were some deliberate changes and non-deliberate changes. I used, for stuffing this, and I think it's worked quite well, instead of using stuffing, I used quilt batting or wadding, and I think I ended up with 8 layers. It's not particularly thick batting I was using, but I had 8 layers of it, and I cut them into the right size for the rectangle, and laid them in there flat rather than stuffing it in. So it's not like super stuffed. You can see it's got, you know, it's got quite a nice squash to it, but it's also nicely evenly stuffed all the way along. I did wonder, and I don't think it would work brilliantly with this design, but with other designs with this, you could do like a real cushion or mattress, stitches that go from front to back to give it even more of that mattress texture. I haven't, and I don't think I will on this, because wherever you do them, it's going to mess up the design. But I'm really happy with it. It's, you know, it's not perfect, but it's very me. I think it's very much in the spirit of the original. It reminds me of the Sal, and stitching it along with others, and it's going to be a really nice piece to display with my spring pieces. I haven't got as many spring pieces as I thought. I thought I did loads last year, and I have got 1 or 2, but I haven't got loads, so I might try and do some more sometime, who knows when. So I've been doing that, and then the other stitching I've been doing is the third part of my stitch along. I'm not going to talk about this loads. If you want to know more about it, go and watch the stitch along videos, but that's what part 3 completed should look like. We've got red, purple, red and red, orange in there. You can see some of the sections is becoming clear how the pattern is going to develop. Other places, not so much yet. It's not too late to join in. All the parts are still available to download. All the corrected versions of the charts are available to download. The link will be below, and it's in my Instagram bio. Yeah, so we're a quarter of the way through in terms of colours done. We are more than a quarter of the way through in terms of stitching done, just to give you a heads up on that. But if you were to start at this point, you would have no problem catching up, I think. People do seem to be really enjoying it despite the mistakes that are coming out every week. And it's really fun watching the hashtag on Instagram, despite all the hashtag woes that we have at the moment. people's different interpretations with different colour palettes coming through. And I can't wait to see them all completed. So that is all I have stitched on, I think. Some of that has been stitching and unstitching, but mostly stitching. I have got a big plan that I'm quite excited about. So I've been watching, as I'm sure many of you have, the various incarnations of the Most Magnificent Ink Circles round robins, and I'm like, I want to do one, but shipping being what it is these days, I was like, actually, I really want to do one just with people in the UK so that it's both cheaper and more reliable to do the shipping, because you've got to send, each piece is going to go to 4 different people. If you're doing that back and forth across the Atlantic, that's a lot of shipping. So anyway, I was looking at the website and there were various ones that I really liked. I really liked the buttons one, and yeah, quite a lot of them. But I have picked this one, which is Red-Headed Bees. And I haven't started it yet, but I'm going to do it. Mine is going to be on this, which is a 20 count Aida. I think it might be 18, but I'm pretty sure that's 20 count Aida. And I think it's a Megan Coffee Craft fabric, which is why it hasn't got a label to it. It's definitely being washed out on screen. It's a sort of buttery yellow. And I'm going to stitch it. I think these are the colours that I've got picked out, but I have to say, when I start stitching, I might change one or more of them. So this is Leo and Roxy Grinch. This is Leo and Roxy Lucille. And this is Classic Colourworks Hayride. And yeah, I'm not absolutely sure, like I say, about those, but we will see. And so what we're doing is, so it's me, it's Lizzie from This Mrs. Fisher Stitches, and it's Claire and Kath, whose Instagram, who I don't think are on YouTube, but their Instagram names I will put below. And somebody's doing a dragon one, somebody's doing a horse one, somebody's doing, I think, one of the tools ones, arranging tools. So it's going to be, I'm really looking forward to stitching on all the others, and not having to stitch any of them 4 times. But we're all starting by stitching our own, so that we can make any of those changes if we want to. If you know, if you thought this is the wrong fabric, or this isn't the right thread, or I'm definitely going to need more thread than I think, before we send it off to the next person. So the goal is to have a quarter of this stitch by the beginning of April, when I will send it to its next stitcher, and I will get something else to stitch on. And we're not giving ourselves you know, pressure on this. The aim is that we will do the first quarter by April, the second quarter by August. I think that's right, something like that. July, maybe. July sounds right. The third quarter by September, and then back to the owner, hopefully by the end of the year, I'll have a completed piece that 4 people will have stitched on. I think it'll be really fun. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be my next start. I want to do the next section of the stitch along. I have stitched the whole stitch along. I'm just doing it again so that I can do it part by part, and hopefully try and spot some of the mistakes before other people get to them. But we're on to the bit where those are quite small. So I think this is going to be my next start. And I don't know how long that will take to do a quarter of that ink circles, but I'm looking forward to it a lot. The other thing I'd really like to do, or at least start in February, is the piece that I'm doing with the leftover floss and fabric from the holiday countdown sale. So I'm doing this, which is the new chart from Jacob Modern Folk Embroidery. I'm going to do a version that uses not all 25 colours from the holiday countdown, because there's at least one that I didn't use in the holiday countdown and I won't use in that, but it certainly will include more than the charted colours, and will be from the holiday countdown pack. And the aim is that those 2 will then be companion pieces that I'm going to make into a stitching book. That's my plan. So that's the other thing that I want to start. I say this every time, I do want to make more progress on my Gecko Rouge. I honestly don't know that I have the brain power for it at the moment. Life's been quite tricky the last few weeks. HRT is still working, thankfully, when I remember to change the patches. Other medication is still working, thankfully. But despite that, it has been a really hard couple of weeks. Last weekend I didn't do anything, to the extent that I didn't even go to my art class. Actually been quite a bad way not to go to art class, and I did go to art class yesterday, so things are improving, but physically I'm not in great health. My cough is just about gone after a month, so that's brought with it some not great rest. The issue, I've talked about this before, I know I've got this issue with my hand and with my mouth following COVID that are a medical mystery, and cold weather is not great. They really are quite uncomfortable and intrusively so at the moment. Having got over the cough, I now have an almost infinite capacity to sleep and a very low capacity to do anything else. Emotionally, things have been quite hard. My cousin died last week, which is really hard, and lots of other things are going on that are emotionally and spiritually quite difficult. I haven't washed up for weeks. It's at the point where it's actively making life more difficult, but I have not got capacity to do it. Today's goal is to wash up a sink full of mugs. Yesterday, when I said let's go, I bought a new mug just so I could have a clean mug to have a cup of tea without doing any washing up. But today I need to wash up some mugs. That's it. I mean, literally everything I own needs washing up, but I can't. If my goal is to do the washing up, I can't do it. I think I can do one sink full of mugs. Yeah, so it's hard. It's good. I do have to take Charlie out every day. I don't always get dressed for that. Sometimes I put my coat on over my pyjamas. And he doesn't always get a long walk at the moment, but he does get out, which means I get out every day. And I get some work done and some not. And my work are very patient and very kind about that sort of thing. But it's been quite a grim couple of weeks around here. So, there've been days where, I thought I would be way further ahead of stitching. I was going to catch up and get a week ahead of myself on the stitch along and then do this and then do that. And I just haven't. So I don't know how much I will be doing for the rest of February. I hope some. But all of that was to say, oh yeah, that's where I was with this, the Gecko Rouge, is I do really enjoy stitching on it, but it does require a lot more concentration than most stitching. And I don't really have the capacity for that at the moment. And that is okay. I think I've talked about this on the channel before, I have got a sabbatical April, May and June. And I hope that that is going to be a reset in lots of ways for me. I have got some things I'll need to be doing during that time, but they're much lower stress than normal. I won't need to be checking my emails. I won't need to be, responding to things in the moment. Yeah, I can have proper rest, hopefully, for quite a lot of that time. And I hope, therefore, with that, that I will feel like, actually, I've got the capacity to do things like really complicated full coverage stitches again. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, I did have a stitching crisis while I was sitting on the sofa in a sort of blue funk a few days ago. In fact, I think it was last Saturday, and I treated myself to fish and chips for dinner because that's excellent. You don't have to do any washing up for that. And I'd got some Coke, a little bottle of Coke, by the sofa. Obviously hadn't put the lid on properly. Managed to knock it off right into the basket where I store all my stitching. Not all my stitching, but like all my current works in progress, my DMC colour chart, things that I'm about to start working on. So this fabric was in there and various other things. It was just carnage. Anyway, it could have been a lot worse. So the basket that I have, I really love it. It's bright orange and bright pink. It's from Sainsbury's, but whatever brand at Sainsbury's it is. But it is woven strands of plastic, so it's not got a solid frame to it. There are holes in it, so the Coke didn't pour in and then sit in a layer puddle at the bottom soaking it in. It poured through it, so stuff got splashed but actually not really badly soaked, for which I'm very grateful. So my Gecko Rouge got some splashes on it, this fabric did, some other things that I had been stitching on. My Sing Like a Bee is in there while I'm waiting to do Float Like a Butterfly. Some charts in there, some threads in there. So what I did after panicking, obviously that's what I did first, I sorted everything out. Everything that hadn't been stitched on like this went through the washing machine on a delicate cycle and has come out fine. Everything that I had stitched on got soaked in the bath in cold water. I thought I had some soap flakes, but I couldn't find them, so it was just soaked in water a couple of times. Nothing ran, which was amazing. Mostly it was DMC. It was my stitch along, so not the one that I'm currently doing, that wasn't in the basket thankfully, but the one that's finished, but that was all DMC. The Gecko Rouge, which is all DMC, and one small piece that had some, oh, and the Float Like a Butterfly, and another tiny piece that had some classic colourworks on it, none of which ran. Or at least if they did, I think that you could say probably the bathwater was just very slightly tinged with pink at the end, but none of it then sank into anything else. The stitch along was stitched on white and it still looks white in the background. Yeah, so I think it was a lucky escape, really. There were threads that I also soaked in the cold water and then hung up to dry, and they seem to be fine. Don't do it. I mean, don't throw Coke all over your stitching basket. But if you're going to, I think I did get away with it better than might have done. Don't panic is the answer. I'm glad it didn't get on this because I think that might well have stained. That's platinum Zweigart, and I think that would have shown. Whereas something, you know, with something like this, because it's hand dyed, even if there were, as long as there isn't a tide mark, which there isn't, you know, if there were parts that had a very slightly darker bit, it's not going to really notice. Certainly not by the time I've stitched on it. It's not really going to notice. But I think that one went through the machine, I think is absolutely fine. So that's good. Right, I think, I told you this is going to be quite short. Oh, I know what I've got to do. Giveaway winner, hooray! Last Flosstube, I was announcing my 500 subscriber giveaway. Let me just grab this. So I did do a giveaway on my Christmas Day live. That has now been sent to Linda Glover, who won that. This was my 500 subscriber giveaway. This handmade project bag stitch piece. This is from Yasmin's Made with Love Tulips and Stars pattern. Project bag made by me using a tea towel from the K Facet exhibition. It is lined, it is a zipper, it's made with whatever the stuff is you make these things with. You also get 10 of the Kate Blanford acrylic floss drops in a yellow flower, and you also get this chart from Cosford Rise Stitchery, Jolly Happy Soul. It's quite wintry. You could make it Christmassy. I think you can definitely count wintry, and February is still technically winter. So I haven't drawn the winner, but I will draw it before I put the video out, and the name will be across here. And if that is your name, congratulations. This will be on its way to you as soon as you get in touch with me to give me your postal address. If you're on Instagram, the easiest way is to DM me on Instagram. If you're not on Instagram, leave me a comment below to say I'm the winner but I'm not on Instagram, and we will figure out a way for you to send me your address so that I can put this in the post to you. Great. So that's the giveaway. Right, thinky thoughts. Do you know what I've been thinking about for a little while is how interesting it is that people have such different tastes in cross stitch. So like many people on Flosstube these days, I used to stitch, you know, when I was a kid. I remember making something for my mum when I was 7 or 8. It was quite a lot of stitching, a Happy Mother's Day piece, but also when I was older, when I was a teenager, doing various cross stitch pieces. amongst a whole range of other things. I did embroidery and crochet and knitting, and I had a sewing machine and all that kind of thing. But cross stitch is definitely part of that repertoire. But why I really stopped doing it was because I found it so difficult to find anything I wanted to stitch. I didn't want to stitch a dimensions kit. I didn't want to stitch a fancy lady. I didn't want to stitch things that I thought were kind of granny-ish. And that seemed to be all that was available to me. So occasionally I would find books in the library that would be, usually they would be tapestry charts for needlepoint, but you could cross stitch them, and you could cross stitch them with or without the background, and they could be more interesting. I remember doing some sort of geometric Persian inspired designs from a book, and I can't remember what else, maybe some animals at one point, that sort of thing. But it felt like quite hard work to find things that I was interested in stitching. And then 4 or 5 years ago, so it wasn't pandemic, it was definitely before the pandemic, but nonetheless, 4 or 5 years ago, I started stitching again. I remember wanting to stitch a little Easter thing for a friend who's a cross stitcher, and I thought she'd really like a little Easter thing. I was trying to encourage her that she should do an Easter display, because she absolutely loves doing Christmas displays, and I thought she'd really love putting out an Easter display. So if I make something for her, she'll have to put it out, and then she'll have to do a display. And, you know, and as I was searching for something to do for that, I was like, oh, that looks really fun. I'd like to stitch that. And one of the first things I stitched in that sort of return to stitching was this, Here Comes the Sun by Emma Congdon. I loved it. I really loved it. It's bright, it's beautiful, it's very contemporary. It goes perfectly with my sort of style in my house. It's not in any way twee or granny-ish or, you know, any of those things that had put me off stitching. It was something that I really liked. And so I, you know, started looking at more things. This was a little kit from Caterpillar Cross Stitch Club that I was in for a while. I stitched a pigeon coop design in one of those clubs. I stitched a penguin that I really like, penguin in a snow globe. You know, and and we're sort of doing little bits of my own designing at this point as well, but, you know, still finding loads and loads of new stuff out there that I was like, actually, I really like that. I really like that. And some of it were things that I'm like, no, I can see that, but it's not going to be my thing. Reproduction samplers, not really my thing. I have stitched one reproduction of a sampler that I happen to own, but, you know, mostly they're not my thing, although, you know, sometimes I really love them. The sort of unfinished object that I have that is not a current work in progress, but one day I will get back to, is A Saviour's Praise by Shakespeare's Peddler. And that's, you know, it's not a reproduction, it's a contemporary sampler in an old sampler style. And I really like it. And I really do want to finish it. I'm sort of funking up the colours a bit to make it more me. But, you know, I really like it. So I understand people have very different styles. And the cross-stitch community is broad and varied. And, you know, there's obviously a huge sampler and reproduction sampler part of that community, and that's wonderful. I really love the sort of focus on history and social history, women's history that comes with that. Even if they're not the things that I necessarily want to stitch, I really appreciate that there is that sort of commitment to an honouring of the girls and women who stitched historically, those kind of things. But I also really love that there's room for the kind of really modern contemporary designer. I love the stuff that's quirky and different, that's quite niche. I love stitching smalls much more than I love stitching big things, all of that. Anyway, it has been very interesting to me, and I don't know whether you have noticed this as well. I don't know whether it is just that more people who are stitching these kind of things that I'm about to talk about are now also on Flosstube, or that genuinely more people are now stitching those kind of things. But I have definitely noticed amongst the people I watch a growing number of people who love stitching the fancy ladies, the dimensions kids, the Thomas Kincaid. And it is astonishing to me. You know, so it's really astonishing to me when Liz Matthews, for example, of Hello from Liz Matthews, whose designs I think of as very pared back, often very stylish, you know, some of them do have a more traditional edge, some of them are more contemporary edge. Her colour palette is not always precisely my colour palette, but, you know, they're sort of, you know, they're primitive when they're primitive, or they're contemporary, but they're not twee, they're not granny-ish. And yet, you know, as you will know if you watch her Flosstube, she is absolutely obsessed at the moment with dimensions kits. The stockings, and then the bigger dimensions gold kits, and then she's just started this stitch along for a smaller dimensions kit. And I look at them and I'm like, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. That is art that would never occur to me in a million years to want to put on my wall. Let alone spend hours and hours and hours of my life to create it, to put it on my wall. I think it's art that at best deserves to be on a greetings card that will go in the bin after 10 minutes. I apologise. If that's the art that you love, I mean, that's great. That is great. If that's the art that you love and you want to spend hours and hours and hours doing, and you want to treasure on your wall, for me, it does absolutely nothing. For me, it is the reason I stopped cross-stitching. And I don't quite know where I'm going with these thinky thoughts, but it's just partly, I wonder if what we're seeing is a sort of natural things that go around come around. There's a nostalgia, perhaps. People who are stitching these things now remember this sort of style of thing from their youth and are like, oh, that's what Granny used to stitch. And, you know, that's a sort of positive memory for them. I also wonder if there's something about people feeling freer to talk about what are the things they actually really do like. So instead of trying to be cool or modern or fit in with the cool kids, be able to say, actually, I just do love a mirabilia. I just do love a fancy lady in a ball dress. Okay. I don't know why you would love that. I don't know why anyone really has pictures of random people that they don't know on their wall in their house. I would never occur to me to do that. I mean, possibly if you gave me the Mona Lisa for Christmas, I might put that up somewhere, and I don't know her. But yeah, I don't get it. It's not my style. It's not my taste. But maybe we now are in a place where it's okay to say that that is, and that's fabulous. If we've got to a place where people are really feeling free to say, actually, those things that people used to really sneer at and turn their noses up at, I love those. I love those. And that's what I want to stitch, and that's what I want to have on my wall. And that's great, isn't it? I think it is. I think it's great if there's room for everybody. I think it's great if there's room for people who what they really love is that kind of wall decoration, I'm going to call it. So, you know, it's never art that's going to be in an art gallery. I mean, none of my cross stitch is going to be in an art gallery. I'm not making those kind of claims. But it's also not really making claims to be art. I think what I do in cross stitching is craft. And I think there's a difference, and I think it's okay. I don't think, this is going on into another rant that I've had loads of times over the years, I don't think it's a bad thing to call craft craft. I don't think craft is lesser inherently than art, but I do think it's different. I don't think art is just about making something pretty, whatever technique you're using, whether you're stitching or painting or sculpting or whatever. I think art is about communicating a meaning or an emotion or a message. I mean, I guess there's kind of a message in that, but most of what I stitch, I don't think there's a lot of message in this. I think it's pretty. I think it's decorative. I think it's craft. And I'm fine with that. But, you know, there's room. I'm not saying you can't create art with cross stitch. I think Jordan Nasser, for example, what he does is definitely art with cross stitch. I'll put a link to his Instagram below because I think his work is absolutely stunning and absolutely deserves to be in art galleries. But this isn't what we're really talking about. We're really talking about people doing craft with different styles and different taste. And, you know, when we talk about taste, often there's a sort of taste level. You have a high taste level or a low taste level. It's taken me years to embrace my low taste level for literature. I just like a romance. You know, it's not that I can't read a Booker Prize-winning novel or that I haven't read Booker Prize-winning novels, but I'd rather read a Mills and Boon. So sue me. I have a lowbrow taste for literature. And I think we need to stop actually saying this is low and this is high and this is good and this is bad. They're just different. I have a different taste for literature. I like the romance. I'll read some other stuff as well, but I basically like romance. I have a different taste level for art. My taste level is this, and it's this, and it's definitely this. But it's never going to be a full coverage of a piece of art, a full coverage of a picture that I wouldn't even pay a £5 for as a poster. That's one of the reasons why I thought for a long time I'd never do a full coverage, because I just would go through sites like Heaven and Earth Designs and just think, I don't want any of these on my walls. I don't like any of them enough that if it was just a print, I'd have it on my wall, let alone that I want to devote hundreds of hours to stitching it. And it is amazing to me to see how that sort of thing not only is persisting, but actually is growing, that people are wanting more and more to stitch on those kind of things that I think of as old-fashioned or as twee or as, yeah, I don't know. And so if that's you, if you're loving that stitching, if you're joining in the Dimension stitch-alongs, if you're embracing all the fancy ladies, I mean, absolutely wonderful, and go for it. And I will look at your floss tubes and I'll see your pieces on the brow tables and I'll think that's an amazing piece of work. But it's not going to be for me. So anyway, I guess where I'm at with those thinky thoughts, I don't know that they go anywhere particularly, but I would be interested to know in the comments whether your personal style has changed, your personal preference for what you like to stitch, whether there are things that once you would have thought, no way, I'm not going to stitch that, but now you actually do stitch and really love. Do you love the Dimensions? Do you love the Mirabilias? Have you always loved those? Or have they fallen in and out of favour? I would really love to hear your sort of story of style in cross-stitching. I think that'll be really interesting. So that's it from me for now. I don't know when I will be back. I'm currently at the section of the stitch along where it's weekly parts, and so weekly videos for that. I'm not getting a lot of stitching done, as I said, so it may be a while before there's another normal floss tube. Subscribe, I guess, hit the notification bell if you want to make sure you don't miss it. If you were the winner of the giveaway, please do get in touch either on Instagram or leave me a comment here and we can sort that out so I can get that in the post to you. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Happy stitching, everyone.